Okay, I got already the first good question. How would you handle common code when multiple controls share the same code? How would you package them? So I got lots of BCE questions, which is a good thing. And now we have 8 p.m., so we should start the official part of the show. And welcome to the 140th airhacks-tv. And let's start with the very first question from the chat. And the question is about controls. Before we discuss the controls, maybe I should reintroduce the idea. This is the boundary control entity. And the story, just to recap, is the following. I use my own inventions, and I failed. I had to in every project I had to justify or explain why I'm using what I'm using, and then I found an old standard called BCE, boundary control entity, or entity control boundary, ECB, and it was described or is described in multiple books. And then I just used that and pointed to the already existing documentation and books, which solved my problems because I didn't have to explain why I'm using this because it's an established standard. Now, what I also did, I invented the author of this, Ivor Jacobson. He invented this on Ericsson. It's on my podcast, so you can listen to it. And I asked, what do you think, how I'm using this? And he said, okay, it is how it was intended to be used. And the boundary control entity is, I would say, that simple. This is why my impression is I always ask developers in a project, do you like it? And usually, if developers would just like to implement applications, they immediately like it. So now, what's the idea? So we have business components, and the business component is basically something with domain meaning, and this is like users. And the business component is a Java package or a folder in custom elements, web components, and the component comprises 3 layers: boundary, control, entity, and every layer is a Java package. And now the boundary has classes which communicate with the outside world. Could be web components or Lambda listeners or message-driven beans or whatever communicates with the outside world. Controls is a developer decision to do something. Let's say if you would start with a project, of course, everything would be in boundary. The boundary becomes too big. So you would extract parts of the boundary to a control, and control is just the implementation of the behavior. And the entities are data objects. In best case, domain objects with behavior and state. In worst case, data transfer objects like or Java records, or worst case, it's just like it is. Okay, and also funny, in the recent Java user group, someone asked me whether I'm coding because they thought I'm a YouTuber. And what I did, I mentioned the an airhacks-tv where someone donated one Canadian dollar, and and because they thought, I this was actually my first dollar I earned on YouTube. Okay. Now, this was the idea, and now someone asked me, not someone, this is the Ike, and or Ike asked me, okay, what if there's some shared code in controls, how to deal with it? And let's say logging. So I think the most shared control is possibly a logger. So in this particular case, I would create a business component called logging, logger, audit, tracing, whatever is the purpose of the logger. Put control, and there is a logger, and the logger is used by all other components. So the idea is you can also have technical business components, but they should reflect real requirements, and then it can be functional or non-functional. But you must not use names like DTO, because DTO is just nothing, or DAO or repository, whatever, because there is no business meaning in it. Okay, so now I have to be careful with. So I hope I answered Ike's question. Then Sam asked me, there might be a lot of generic. I thought genetic questions I wouldn't be able to answer. But what are your views on the AI wave and the new frontier of quantum computing? So quantum computing, no idea what the progress is. And AI has to be taken seriously because it is also taken by managers and companies seriously. So I think there is no way out. So what we have to do is to adapt the AI as fast as possible and think how we can use it to improve ourselves, be faster and sustainable, right? It doesn't help if we are faster in the first 3 iterations and then we fail completely and no one knows what's going on. So that's actually the problem. Okay, so my viewpoint is, and this is what I talked in Silesia Java user group. So I think Cash attended the session, and Sam, I will also do it in Vienna. Maybe I record something on as a screencast, but the point being is that you can be actually crazy efficient with AI and write beautiful Java code if you know what they are doing. And the idea being is because LLMs learned on the free stuff on the internet and Java was always free, so all the idioms are already encoded in the LLM knowledge, or LLMs know about our best practices. So we can use a very short prompts to generate very good code. Yes, and Cash says it was nice hearing Tornado VM. Great, and if you're interested, Cash, just listen. I had the Tornado VM guys on my podcast, so if you're interested, just go ahead. So Alex asked me, so if business logic is small enough, it can be located in a boundary. Absolutely, Alex. And I'm a little disappointed that you're asking this because you know my code already. So Alex attended several airhacks live, and the best example is just simplistic health check. Usually you would have a component health, and boundary would be the health check, so there will be no control, no entity. But let's say the health check is more sophisticated. So we have a health check which has to check the database or whatever. Then I will implement the actual logic in a control, which can be shared or not, and the boundary exposes the control as a health check, and the entity could be a Java record, which provides additional status information or health check for a database. So Ike asked me, one or more questions related to entities. How would you handle when multiple application projects use the same database or entities? If there are several projects, so I know where you are going with it, but if this is a kind of a formal specification, then generate once, and there is one team who just cares about the entities, put the entities, compile them, put the entities to a Nexus and say this is the version 1.0, and the entire company has to use the entities. If this is not the case, so this is the database somehow shared, but every project needs a different view to the database, what you could do, generate once and copy and paste the source code, and every project takes ownership of the entities. This would be my approach. Hey, Apollo, welcome. So I think they only work good for small contexts. At some point, they start to hallucinate. Apollo, very true, but a cool story is with BCE, they're very small context, the business component. So it actually works good enough, and it works good enough. So it just works. Tibor says AI equals art, dementia, actually real dementia. Yeah, what I can tell you is I think AI is useful, and a developer with AI will make jobless a developer without AI. This is my feeling. Because AI in worst case, in worst case AI is sometimes useful code completion, and in best case AI helps you to generate a lot of boring code, and you just focus on on the real thing. And how I work with AI, if AI something creates code, I take the time and review the entire code and take ownership of the code. So this is what you have to do, otherwise you are completely lost. Oh, a friend of the show, Kaspars, asked me, who would like to interview who is not related to IT? Who would you like to interview who is not related to IT? A person who is not related to IT at all. I think are the persons who are not related to IT nowadays? Right? So this would be an interesting question. So I would like to interview someone who is not related to IT. The question is there a company who is not related to IT? This is really hard to tell, right? Jao Lopez asked me, just wanted to say that the tip from last airhacks worked. Like a charm, they provision concurrency. Yes, and in a current project, we're also thinking about this. And you can, if you're under heavy load, you will save money with provision concurrency. This is actually the cool trick. Okay, now, thank you, Jao, for your feedback. Now, start with the show, right? So the first question is, Mukiri asked me, I hope it's Mukiri, he's also, what is a Golang? I think this is a game like chess, Go, right? So I'm just kidding. Okay, this is a Java engineer from Nairobi. And hi, Adam, what are your thoughts in the future of reactive frameworks libraries since virtual threads existence? I spent 20 minutes to rearrange the windows and still doesn't work. So, and the soon structured concurrency API. So, we had a listener, but I think he gave up. But he rewatched all the airhacks-tvs, so 140 hours, which is crazy. And what I never understood why we need reactive frameworks at all in a standard case, because the standard Java programming was good enough, and this is what I always used. So for me, there was no additional added value for reactive programming, and I also was interested in Scala in the hope one day it will solve my problems. But it worked, but it's not like, in my case, it didn't work. So I know project who like Scala, but for me, it was like Java was fast enough. And the application server are crazy fast. So with virtual threads, there's even less use cases or less reasons to use reactive frameworks. So what I think is reactive frameworks are great if the use case is reactive. So the best case is Kafka Streams is for me reactive programming. So reactive programming for me is like, imagine like Excel, right? You have two cells calculation with when one parameter changes, the result also changes. This is for me reactive. In such cases, I would use reactive libraries because the use case is reactive. In all other cases where you have HTTP request or a WebSocket request or whatever from outside, I don't see the reactivity at all. So I never got the idea why we need reactive programming. So Golang is such a nice language. Maybe. So I think so. But if we start with Golang, the question is why we not use Rust, and we use Rust. So why we not use how do you call it? There's another language. Forgot there are lots of alternative languages. Kotlin, of course. Kotlin, forgot about that, right? So Ike asked me, Adam, I would assume that I would assume when I use AWS RDS proxy, there is no longer a need for crack. Why not? Because crack is snap start, and with snap start, the startup times are better. So snap start is about startup time optimizations, but if you use provision concurrency, you don't need snap start. Maybe this way. And AWS RDS proxy is just about this is good for multiplexing the lambdas, but doesn't help you with startup time. Wow, this is hyperactive chat. So pretty cool. So it was never as active as today. So I don't know what happened. Maybe people confuse me with a YouTube star or whatever, but very good. So welcome here. So Tibor asked me, guys, try to use reactive programming with Vertex and compare it with reactive in Spring Boot and Quarkus. It is significantly different load for your brain in Vertex. Cannot be compared. Yeah, but why should I try something if I don't have a problem, right? So that's the question. You know what I mean? So now Apollo says we should just return to Perl. Of course. I work with Java, C++, and Go at work. Yeah, I also like Java. So my words. And Apollo is also very right. Quarkus uses Vertex behind the scenes, and this is good. Now, Hayden Jones. I'm curious where are you from, Hayden? Asked me a very good question. And the question was so good, that I today, before the show, recorded as short and will publish the short tomorrow or day after. And the question is, Hayden Jones hates white spaces, but he uses sometimes. You see the white spaces here? So there are some white spaces, but he doesn't like them. So I'm just kidding. And he asked, what to do here. And what you can do in with Java records, you can use the compact constructor. So what you did here is with the trim, don't use this constructor. Use compact constructor. What it doesn't mean? It means it is just user form without the parameters. So remove this, and then remove this, and then you have the compact constructor. So this is what I will do. Should I look into using Jakarta validation? Maybe, but I like this code actually a lot. There is no magic. You don't need validation, sophisticated validation. I would like I would use Jakarta validation and custom validators to validate more complex stuff. So I don't know. You have cross checks like is the address valid or something like this. I hope you. So and there will be a short with the compact constructor, and dedicated to you. Now, okay, something new, and so the BCE designed domain. I think I registered 9 years ago, and always had a bad feeling because I never published the website, which was fixed now. And I actually did it before the Dev Talks conference in Romania. I was in a coffee shop with a great coffee in Cluj. This is the best coffee ever, my opinion. And there was an internet, so I published the website. So this is the story, or parts of the website. I think the infrastructure was there, but the content was improved. And so what I did recently, there's another website, Constructions Cloud. And what I do more and more, I publish templates. They are actually already on my GitHub account, but this is like, index of them. Because I got lots of questions on what they are doing with CDK. And now you see, so that I think I have at least 20 more projects which I can share. And why I do this? Because so far, I just used a example which had function URL and HTTP API, and I always said, if I show this on conferences, this is actually not real world, because I usually decide before the projects, do we need function URL or HTTP API or CloudFront, and this is more realistic. So it's not still production ready, because it's too generic. The names you have to rename, but this is the idea. So if you, for instance, go there, then you will see my GitHub repository with and by the way, all the examples are built according to the BCE architecture. Okay, this was the announcement, and BCE was already announced multiple times, and I'm announcing BCE for I think since for 15 years or more or longer, and so we did this. So now let's go quickly through the time machine, because this one is interesting. So someone asked me here, JSONP for securing Java-ee applications. And this is interesting one, because what I find myself, I use less and less security in Java-ee and rely more and more on external API gateways or secure services. So what usually happens in my Java-ee applications or microprofile applications, I actually never distinguish between both. I use whatever Quarkus provides as a standard. So what I'm relying is on the JSON Web Token. So I get the JSON Web Token. I'm happy. I'm not implementing any OIDC flows. They are also implemented in application load balancer or Keycloak or whatever. Thoughts on lambdas and more functional Java. So I like both lambdas and streams. So I think we arrived. So this is from July 2017, and there was the question, is a stream a thing and functional Java a thing? I would say we are using now functional Java without thinking about this. We just using those streams and filters and maps and flat maps, and it's like it is, right? Now, this is interesting. Thoughts on AWS Lambdas, because I think you will rewatch. I didn't rewatch this show, but I'm pretty sure I would say why we need Lambdas if the application servers are good enough, right? So this was pretty sure I said this 8 years ago. So, and it's still the case because actually my opinion didn't change a lot. So if you're on premise, from my opinion, it doesn't make any sense to try to replicate Lambdas on premise because we don't have any spare or idle servers. Usually, most of my clients have problems that the data centers are overloaded and not that they are idle. And therefore, adding Lambda to this equation makes the entire situation even worse. So I would say Lambdas make only sense in the cloud, but if you're happy on premise, don't go to the cloud. But if there are reasons to go to the cloud, either you know the reason, and if you have to go to the cloud, then I will go to serverless and then go to Lambda because, you can just pick your jakarta-ee and microprofile application and run it as Lambda, no problem. Okay, the size of React.js. What I do for years is I'm using custom elements and web components, and all projects so far are happier than I thought. So my impression is, I'm a strange one. I like custom elements, and maybe if I introduce to our projects, developers will hate it because they love Angular or React, but the opposite was true. So far, all projects really liked custom components, and the feedback I got sometimes, it is harder to find the right visual element or visual component. But having said this is, it's true, but you have the same problem with React or Angular because there is just blank frameworks and you have to pick the right components as well. So a servlet login module, I think servlets are out of fashion. How to handle transactions in thin walls. I would say transactions still are a thing, even in serverless. So we try to be transactional as much as possible. In a recent project, we spent a significant amount of time thinking about transactions in S3, for instance, or dealing with transactions in S3. So still a thing. Prime faces. So I would say JSF, I use JSF, I don't use JSF anymore, but the only reason is not like they are out of fashion, whatever. There's the remaining providers prime faces. So therefore we have a standard which is implemented by only one provider, which is problematic because we say, what if when prime faces goes away, then, too much risk. WebSockets versus long polling is still an interesting one. I would say it really depends. JSON object as DTO, and this is timely because I got the question recently, should we use Java to JSON mapping or should we rely on JSON object JSONP? And what I found myself is that in more complex APIs, we tend to use JSONP because you have more control over versioning, over optional fields and stuff like that. And with LLMs and AI, it is easier to generate this snippet. And so you can generate a snippet, see whether it looks right, and write system tests, of course. Microservices in Jenkins. So Jenkins, I didn't use Jenkins for a long time. But what I use currently, I'm still on AWS. We use code pipeline and code build all the time. It's like serverless Jenkins. And works great. So we actually always start with CI/CD. Opinions on Docker Swarm. So Docker Swarm is, I think, no more there, right? So Kubernetes won. But I think you can still be successful in tiny project with Docker Compose. You don't need Kubernetes all the time. Is MVC dying? Not actually, because in Jakarta there's new spec about model view controller in front ends, and and fun enough because lots of questions. If you look back, 8 years ago, if I got question, why are you doing Java? Java is dying. Why do you not using the other thing? And what often happened, like remember there was question regarding Play framework, why I'm using Java and not Play, and that Play is out of fashion in Java, and microprofile is still going strong. Now let's take a look back on the chat. So we have here cache. Cache. Okay, the window arrangement is actually pretty cool. You see, so it is working. The problem is now it is unusual because so thank you. Hayden says, not true with everything in camel case. Yeah, Hayden John, the next time you have to ask questions in camel case. No problem. We are Java developers, so we can absolutely do this. But I think Java is kebab case, right? I would, it could be useful to increment a string, maybe, with JavaScript, right? So this should work. So, okay, yeah, No Sleep says that, and I never questions that reactive may be more efficient, but the question is, should we invest more time to develop something which is more efficient when it, at the end of the day, doesn't matter because we have enough memory and enough CPU, right? So if you would run, if this is a Netflix, different scale, but my projects are not Netflix, so usually boring enterprise apps. In this particular case, we can do whatever we like, and as long as it's stable, you will win, right? So, Ike asked me, the AWS Lambda, so if I understand correctly, the AWS Lambda snapshot is the crack implementation. This crack stands for coordinated restore at checkpoint, and it snapstart is a bit different because a crack is just Java serialization, and snapstart serializes the entire micro VM to a disk, encrypts everything, and shares the data in 3 availability zones. And next time the Quarkus, so this is what I did, it just reloads the entire thing from memory, right? So this is more than crack. And in my implementation, I was creating a pool with one connection, so it will be available, I think, on a snapstart. So, Ike, what you could do is, if you are using Aurora V2 or V1, you should use V2. This is RDS, basically serverless. There's a data API. So you could be connectionless. So, of course, JDBC and JPA doesn't work anymore. But you could go to the database via HTTP, and then you don't have any problems with connections. Okay. Tibor says streams should be useful very carefully, and they should be substituted and SQL scripts. I don't get it because PL SQL and SQL scripts and streams are 2 different. So Java stream, right? So you could have Java stream without any PL SQL or SQL. Okay, but go. So this was the first one, and Mukiri. Let's see. Or Muchiri or Mukiri, that's the question. What is the right? So, ask me in the BCE pattern, where do you place global exception handling code? So, if this is your requirement and you really need a global exception handling code, then create a component, global exception handling. It's a little bit long, maybe GEH, and say in package info, GEH stands for global exception handling. And this is your requirement. So you have a component with, so you can also, I would call it errors, for instance, right? Or exceptions, and put it there. So this is the global handler. But having said that, what I think is wrong is putting all exceptions there. Because if you have address not exist exception, I will put address not exist exception if it happens on boundary layer to the boundary layer of an address component, and not to one package all exceptions, right? Because it's not like we are, how to call it, a crazy store managers, let's say, where you have, packages, Java packages like objects, interfaces, classes, interfaces, records, exceptions. So we are not just categorizing, the packages or the code after, how to call it, element types rather than business meaning, right? So, also, for instance, if I have booking and payment packages and I need to handle exceptions thrown in a central place, switch, return to user, where will all this be? So if this exception, let's say, happens because of timeout or networking, let's say networking, then we have a networking package with the exception. It is not a problem. So the question is why you need a global exception handling. And if you know why, This Y should be inspiration for the name of the package. This one is about entities and DTOs. The usual talk is I've had entity classes should not be transit data. We should use DTOs. Yeah. And what I don't like is the usual talk. I would say I don't care about usual talks. In the projects, you say, what happens when we serialize entities directly to the outside world? What can possibly go wrong? So this is the sentence. What can go wrong? And if we say, okay, attribute can disappear, attribute can change, if we catch that with system tests, all is good. If there are no tests, it's criminal in any way, whether we have DTO mapping entities or not. So I would say I would start without mapping. You can always introduce mapping afterwards. And I think we are no more in project with hundreds of developers. We need strict rules for everyone. If we have a small motivated teams, I don't see any problems. So you are successful in project without any mapping. So it doesn't mean that there are projects which had trouble with mapping, but I would rather write less code and move faster. So user and user request DTO, exactly. So I don't use this. My user, for instance, if there's Java record, you will find two methods from JSON and to JSON, and this object will serialize itself to JSONP. So this is the flexibility. I can use unit tests to test that. And JSONP, JSON object, Jakarta JSON object is my new DTO. I would say this is, in most cases, cargo cult, but there were real reasons to do that. For instance, back then you couldn't, if you have the binary serialization of objects, what often happened is that the object was, inside there was hidden dependencies to the implementation, and if the exceptions happened on the client because it was serialized via RMI, you get cast or class not found exceptions. So I would say, but great questions actually from Mukiri. Kennedy, I think, is your first name, and Mukiri is your last name, I guess. 2 hours ahead, not bad. Oh, there's a time. Toronto, Canada. So I think Hayden is your first name, I guess. You gave me $1, right? Two episodes ago. So you are responsible that now I'm professional YouTuber, right? So now, Hayden asked me, in your BCE design, in the example user and the fourth boundary. Okay, I think what we are referring to, because I tried to search like Lambda, crazy, but you are right. These are just examples. And the idea is this first page is like, just introduction to the idea. And then at the end, I have concrete examples. So this is like server full. I don't know how to call it. It's not serverless. If you go here, you will find, more or less microprofile Quarkus rules. And if you go to serverless, for now, you will find the Lambda event listener rules. And if you go to web components, you will find web components. It's like JavaScript, custom elements. And in the end, you find the real code. So this is the idea. And my challenge is to keep this as short as possible. So this is all my challenge. I'm aiming for to be as brief and short as possible. Yeah. This is AWS here. It could be Azure Functions, but I don't have code for Azure Functions. I have, but it's outdated actually. But it will be from Quarkus perspective almost the same. But this is AWS Lambda here. This is serverless. This is cloud. So and what's missing? So what I'm working on, you find sometime there will be one card with infrastructure as code. This is interesting. It's also AWS because it's Java on Azure. There will be Bicep on AWS. You can do Java CDK. And maybe CLI applications. So there will be multiple cards here. Okay. And by the way, so we can close this one. Interesting, what happened was this course was fully booked and I added 5 more seats. And yeah, this is almost fully booked. And I'm thinking about repeating the course next year because I don't like, to keep it open. So I should to cap be no more than, let's say, 25, 30 attendees. and now this is already reached. So maybe not repeat the same course. There's always advances with different title, but similar spirit. Okay. And the first course, I got a question, what's the difference? And the first is how to use LLMs to write code for us. So how to write great code with LLMs. And the second one is how to implement agents. And with different protocols, which possibilities do we have? So that's the idea. Okay, this is done. And now go to chat again, hyperactive chat. So Frederick asked me, when we stop caring about documentation just because there is enough memory, we risk losing the discipline and intuition to come write truly good software. Yeah, Frederick, you're right, but it doesn't mean that we don't measure, right? We do not measure. It's exactly if I, buy a car, I can buy Volkswagen, and I'm happy with it, or I can buy Lamborghini, which is faster and but consumes more sprit fuel. And the question is, you can pick either one, right? So it's not like, for instance, right, Frederick, a good example, for loops are often faster than streams, but streams are more readable and more flexible because they can be parallel or not. Of course, if you know what they are doing, you can achieve with for loops always better performance than with streams. But I will be faster with streams and I like the code better, right? So this is the question now what to do, right? And if you would write Java like C, it will be crazy fast. You could have 1 million transactions per second. But actually, I already talk about that. In a project, they asked me about Quarkus Reactive, and it turned out the Quarkus Reactive had 30,000, I think, transactions per second with Hibernate. Without Reactive, it was like 15,000. And my client wanted to ask me to go to Reactive, and it turned out that the most scalable servers in the company only ran 2,000 transactions per second. So I mean, if you go to Reactive route, we would be 15 times faster than actually the most demanding servers in the company, right? With complete overkill. Hayden is the first name. Okay, hi Hayden. It's a strange, GitHub convention. Okay, Hayden. This was someone from Canada because I got $1 Canadian, and it turned out that it's like 80 euros, 80 cents or 70 cents, not 80 euros. Okay. How would you set up the components if you have a REST client that you use for multiple domains? Create a component for the REST client and use it on other components. So the REST clients are in the system tests, and REST clients maybe mean that one component communicates remotely with another one, right? But the components are allowed to directly communicate with each other, and the REST client is used as integration point to let's say Stripe API. I would use REST client, and the REST client would be a control, or a REST client would be an interface which is injected to a control. Okay, in the case of Stripe. Casper asked me, do you have online courses? I had, and I wanted to record them, or record new courses. And what I plan to do is, just for you, keep it secret, to publish all courses. Yes, all trainings courses I had. I wanted to say courses I had to YouTube. Jao asked me, it would be 3 components, orders, cards, and the other for the REST client on the control package. It would be 3 components, orders, cards, and the other. So orders component would have a control, and in the control would be a REST client interface injected to a control which communicates with Stripe, right? And with orders and cards have to communicate with Stripe, then I will create a Stripe component with controls and the REST client. Apollo asked me, and by the way, Apollo, I think this is the guy who knocked down Rocky, right? Or I don't know who won, but I think Apollo was a great, what do you call it? Boxer. How would you organize adapters for cloud storage endpoints. We have shared logic between Azure. Was to make a storage-based class. So what we did is we had S3 and file storage and in-memory storage, and it was enough to have a Java interface with 3 implementations, and you can inject the S3 interface. And the cool story is with Quarkus. In dev mode, you use in-memory, and in production S3. Composition much simpler than inheritance. Yeah, in the case of an interface, realization is right. There's no inheritance, but yeah. And Kaspar, yes, composition is simpler, but if it's simple, inheritance could also work, right? So. Yeah. This is an old movie. But I think we am also too young to know Apollo. But I just remember, Apollo, the name. It's a nice name. Yeah, injection point and qualifiers, and you can have qualifiers depending on the profile. Okay, cool. So what happened? So constructions announced. HTTP API Lambda, new example announced. What also announced? So, but to keep it secret a bit. So there is a new runtime. It's called Agent Core. There are only Python examples, but of course, Quarkus works the best, or Java works the best. So this example deploys ships lean Java code as an Agent Core environment. And what is Agent Core? Is like AWS Lambda without the limitations. So it can run longer than 15 minutes. And the interesting part is the session is very similar to HTTP session. So you get session ID and you can dispatch between various agents. So example is done, and course is announced, and I'm back from Java user group Munich, and I delivered a session. And funny fact, I'm not far away from Munich, but it was very first Java user group meeting in Munich. But in Romania, I think I was 4 times. I was everywhere, but not in Munich. So it was my first time, and it was a great audience. I never got so many questions. And what I did is I presented some slides and explained why Java is the best language for LLMs, and then started coding with that, and then it exploded. So it was, I think, 2.5 or 3 hours, and then we had to stop because timeout exception. Okay, I think we are done. So let's see. And custom element is web component. Yeah. And the custom element is just the web component part. And in the web component part, the custom element is the visual element. Control just receives events and forwards the events to entity. And entity is basically the Redux store, and the Redux store notifies all the boundaries using asynchronous events. So that's the idea, is unidirectional data flow, which is very specific here. Okay. Kumar asked me, I like package by business concept, which helps in DDD. Well, yeah, domain-driven design. I never got domain-driven design because in all Java examples from the beginning, even beginners, it always was domain-driven. We had vehicles, and we had what was it? Ships, vehicles, and airplanes or whatever. It's always like we treated objects like objects, and then it escalated, and we introduced with the mappers and DTOs procedural programming basically. So DD don't mention it, just think in concepts. This is what I try to do. And is not much talk? Yeah, maybe. So I spent lots of time talking about that. I just used that and didn't have to justify myself, why I'm doing this, because it was established. And there was also robustness diagrams. And what also is the case, what I did here, I think the main driver is also that, the visual notations, these icons, where are they? These icons are available in all drawing tools, which was also very important a few years ago. So, Apollo, where are you from, Apollo? Would be interesting to know. And thank you all I think we are never so active as this time. So it was great. By the way, I'm back from DevOps as well, and I picked the next 100 shorts from DevOps conference. So there was a recorded talk about the shorts, which I record daily, and I think I have already I have roughly 100 shorts in the pipeline. And so if I don't record the shorts anymore, it will take 3 months, to publish them completely. Apollo is in Bielefeld. So I was in Bielefeld. I think there was Magi or something, but I was in another company like consultancy. Thank you a lot, and I will say see you next month. Bye.